Hey everyone, it's Kathie. Thanks so much for joining me. I have a new project to share with you. It is the Red Box Challenge card that I made for the Paper Pumpkin contest. I posted up on my blog a few days ago, and I did receive some requests on how I created the card. So today's video is the recreation of the first card. However, I hope you enjoy the second version of it. Now for this card here, I did use Berry Burst, but I'm going to change it up and use Real Red, and the panel is also going to be changed to Real Red. Okay, so Real Red instead, Wild Wasabi, and for the butterfly colors, Bermuda Bay, Tempting Turquoise, Melon Mambo, Daffodil Delight, and we're also going to use Lemon Lime Twist and Black Marker, Wild Wasabi, Cherry Cobbler, and I do have Old Olive there, but I don't recall if I did use it. And then the black and gray watercolor pencils. Here are the measurements of the card base and panel. So it's going to be a top folding card base, and the black panel is going to be changed out to Real Red. And then the smaller white panel is what we're going to use to stamp the flower. I really do like how it turned out nonetheless. And we're going to get started with the stamping. This is the flower stamp from the kit. I did cut off the stem, and we're going to stamp using the back side of it. So ink up the stamp, and then we're just going to ink up just a little bit on the left, but come over a little bit so that you have a little bit of a white space left. Do the same thing on the other side. You want that white space so that it defines the petals. And then stamp, stamp, stamp with whatever ink you have left to create the second row. And we're going to do the same thing, but I am stamping just a little bit different here because I got some ink on my acrylic block there, so it was really distracting me. But same premise, you want that white space to define that center petal, and then stamp, stamp, stamp. So I do like how it turned out, and we're going to continue with this one. And I'm pulling out the Cherry Cobbler marker, and we're going to use the fine tip. So we're going to add details on the bottom of the petals, and then just a little bit of detailing on the top of each petal. Just put light strokes here and there on the top part of the petals, and then your normal strokes at the bottom. And then for the top row, we're just adding just little bits here and there, just to give that illusion that there are additional petals on that side or that row. So again, slightly define the petals, and then a little bit of strokes at the top there and on the side. So make sure your strokes and lines are not super duper thick. Just kind of keep them at the same consistency. And I think I'm pretty happy with the way it looks. All right, and we're going to create the base for each of the flowers next, and this is Wild Wasabi. And when you do your stem, just make sure it's not overly thick and that it's proportioned. And then also the other thing is make sure your stem and your base transition nicely into each other. So here's another look of that. This one is going to be a little bit shorter stem. So see how it connects the stem and the base? You don't want it to look like that. You want it to kind of connect smoothly into each other. All right, we're into the little curved stamp that came in the kit, and I apologize I'm off the screen there because I was really concentrating and trying not to overstamp that one. And then for the left side, I do draw that little curl by hand to match. However, it doesn't have to be identical on both sides. So here's where I'm hand drawing in that additional curly part and those little nubbies at the end. I think it really adds to the detail too. Now onto the leaf stamping, I am using Wild Wasabi and second and third generation stamping. I did finally re-ink up my stamp pad, so the image was coming out a little bit too dark. But this is the tone, the color tone that you want. You don't want it to be super bold. And then this part here, I kind of overthought it when I was doing the final stamping because I ended up getting a little ink on my panel there. So I'm going to have to pull out something to cover that up. Yep, it's there. All right, butterfly is next. I stamped that with VersaFine black ink for fine details. And then don't laugh at this part, but this is my makeshift way of making sure that I stamp my sentiment straight. Twine and then my acrylic blocks holding down the twine there. And this is the happy birthday sentiment from the kit. And not to open up a can of worms, but I don't know about your copy, but my copy, there's something definitely wrong with it. I stamped this twice. It got a little bit darker, but the center part didn't come out right. And so here's a profile look of it. So the center kind of dips in. Yeah. I only made about 3 cards with the stamp set, and every time I had to fix the sentiment with a fine tip marker. So I'm just kind of carefully adding in the lettering, but I'm going to fix it off screen because the H is a little bit too thick for the rest of the lettering, and I want it to be the same thickness. So I'm going to fix that later on. And I'm just coloring up the butterfly. And once I'm finished coloring that, I do hit it with the Daffodil Delight, and I lightly shade or color in the entire image just to soften up the brightness. Okay, and then the next part here, we're going to add in the shading on all of the leaves. So wild wasabi on each of the leaves. And the lighter leaves, I do use Lemon Lime Twist, but I didn't think it was dark enough. So I did hit it with a quick stroke with wild wasabi. And then later on, I do kind of add a bit of shading with the black watercolor pencil too. All right, this is the shading part now with the black watercolor pencil, and I basically use that the most. I just lightly add the shadows in along the stem and the flower and along the leaves. So my shadow is coming from the left. And then once I'm done that, I do come in a little closer to the image, and I do press just a little bit harder so that it's a little bit darker and your image will look a lot more dimensional. And if your shading is a little bit too much and you want to take away a little bit, you can just erase it as long as you haven't pressed too hard. And I'm going to add just a little bit on the right side of that flower, on actually both the flowers. And then also I'm going to add additional shading at the bottom of each of the flower petals, just so that the flower pops out a bit more. And just a tad of shading at the tops of the flower. And once I'm done that, I'm going to shade in the butterfly on the left side, and that way the butterfly is just popping off that page. And then I'm going to add antennas on the butterfly. I do end up coming in with my eraser, just lightly erasing it again because I thought that the edges were a bit too harsh. So I'm just going to reshade that in. So I'm pretty happy with this card, and I think the next part, what we're going to do is add in some shading along the edge of the panel with Pacific Point. And you don't have to do this part if you don't want to, and just leave the card all white. And then once we're done that, I'm just going to add a little shadow underneath the flower arrangement. And if your edges is a little bit too harsh, just bring in your eraser and soften it up. So I'm pretty happy with the way the card turned out. I do end up putting some itty bitty pearls to cover up my boo-boo, and I did mount it on a real red panel and then also on a top folding card base. So here are the two finished cards. And also a few stills of the one we just made. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Thanks so much for joining me. Bye for now.